Ash Ketchum has left the Pokemon anime, but we still have his years of memories to look back on, so today we are starting a brand new series like no other, where we look back and review Ash's journey and every single episode of the Pokemon anime. We're going to be covering these episodes in batches per video, and each video will act as a mini arc that Ash went through. So strap in and smash that like button because I'd love to really get this one rolling. But now it's time to look back on a journey of a lifetime. Episode 1, Pokemon I Choose You, the very first Pokemon episode and the start of what became a beautiful journey for Ash and Pikachu. I've probably spoken about this episode more than any other, so I'll try not to spend too much time with this one, but this was one of the best starts to a series I've ever seen. The introduction to our protagonist Ash Ketchum, his goals and his dreams to become the greatest Pokemon master who ever lived. It was time for him to begin on his journey. And this episode just makes you fall in love with the world of Pokemon straight away. From Professor Oak's lecture on TV showing off the brand new starters, to the Pokemon battle with the guy who totally looks like Bruno right at the very start, every detail gives us an insight into this larger world through the eyes of our 10-year-old Ash Ketchum. And of course then enters Pikachu, the disobedient rodent Pokemon, Ash's very first friend. It's always crazy coming back here and seeing how rough things started out for these two, with Pikachu just not wanting to do anything Ash says. Also, Ash might be the only brand new trainer to try and use rubber gloves and a leash to get their starter to listen. The episode introduces us to our main Pallet Town characters, the likes of Professor Oak, Delia and Gary. All mainstays throughout the series, they all shine straight away. Delia being the caring, overprotective mother, Professor Oak the wise old man who cracks jokes even at Ash's expense, and then Gary the cocky new trainer who's better than everyone else and wants to crush Ash. So many fun and dynamic characters that make these episodes even better. A new beginning is always fun, and that's no different here with Ash encountering his first wild Pokemon, the likes of Pidgey, Rattata and Spearow, and Pikachu just laughing as he has no idea what he's doing. All of these interactions were great and it just built upon this relationship even more. But we all know where this leads, the flock of Spearow furious with Ash for throwing a rock, and this sets Ash and Pikachu on their destiny. Oh yeah, and Misty is here too. But after a quick bike theft, Ash and Pikachu's getaway began, and this is still one of the greatest moments in the Pokemon anime. Ash stands strong in front of the Spearow to protect his new partner, and he earns Pikachu's trust forever. I can never get sick of this scene, it was just written so perfectly, it holds up to this day, and it was the best possible way to kick off this journey. So this episode is fantastic and it gets a 9 out of 10 rating. Episode 2, Pokemon Emergency. After the fierce encounter with the Spearows, Ash rushes Pikachu to Viridian City, which is our first major town or city to appear after Pallet. And this episode does some heavy lifting for the foundations of the Pokemon world. We straight away are introduced to Officer Jenny, who is a police officer, and she guards this world and makes sure the evildoers aren't up to any shenanigans. It was pretty funny how she mistaked Ash for a Pokemon thief right off the bat. But I love how the Pokédex can also act as your identification in this world. And then we head to the Pokemon Center and get introduced to an even more iconic mainstay in the series, Nurse Joy. The Pokemon Center is one of the most important parts of the series, where injured Pokemon go after battling to recover. And Nurse Joy and Chansey are critical to that. This episode did so much for the world building of the series. So with Pikachu in a bad way, Ash is really going through the motions, doubting himself, wondering if he can hack this journey, and it makes you relate to him and feel sorry for him. I mean, even the people around him like Gary, Professor Oak and Misty are all giving him grief, so it's bad enough as it is. And this is the famous episode where Delia mentions Ash's dad and that it took him 4 whole days to get to Viridian. I'm sure he'll be super important going forward. Alright, so this episode gets going when Misty arrives wanting Ash to pay for the bike that Pikachu absolutely destroyed, and then after this we get introduced to our main villains of the series, Team Rocket. And other than Ash, Team Rocket have appeared more than anyone else, so they are a pretty big deal. And here was their actual first threatening introduction. I thought this episode handled them really well, being enough of a threat to give Ash his first real challenge, but not too much that he's completely overwhelmed. We also learn that Jesse and James own an Ekans and a coffin. Team Rocket are an evil team who try to steal Pokemon, but this trio has their own unique ways of doing things, and even their own uniform. Their goal here is to try and steal all of the Pokemon in the centre, and Ash and the rest try to stop them. This is also where we get a glimpse of what kind of trainer Misty is as well, as we see her first Pokemon, which is a Goldeen. But it was pretty useless since there was no water. But the final conflict happens, and Ash's Pikachu, now back to full health, gets up enough power to blast Team Rocket away for the first time of many, showing them how strong Pikachu is and making them vow to chase it down to the ends of the earth, literally. So this episode set things up in place for the journey ahead. We've got our villains, Team Rocket, we've got a new companion in Misty, and we got our emergency services, if needed, in Joy and Jenny. Just a real solid foundation building episode to kick us on this journey, and it had some really nice character moments for Ash, building upon his self-doubt and letting him overcome that initial setback to keep going. And this episode ends really nicely, setting up the next one, with Ash coming across a Caterpie in Viridian Forest, and looking to get his very first capture. Will he do it? Find out next time. And by that I mean in a few seconds. But episode 2 gets a rating of 7 out of 10. Episode 3, Ash catches a Pokemon. Just like the previous one, this one had some major moments that developed this series going forward. Mainly for Ash and his development as a trainer. Remember that Caterpie that he found at the end of last episode? Well, yeah, he does catch it, although it pretty much had no skill involved since he just threw a Pokeball and Caterpie is already weak, so it just worked. We also learn about Misty's famous hatred of bug Pokemon in this episode, which made for some really funny moments after Ash caught the Caterpie. This episode gives us more insight into the bickering dynamic between Ash and his new companion Misty, and the comedy in some of these early episodes is really top tier. I also love the whole Caterpie and Pikachu conversation under the moon, where you don't know exactly what they're saying, but you can tell Caterpie is pouring its heart out about wanting to someday fly through the sky, and then it looks down sad because Misty doesn't like it. It's crazy how hard they went with this in only episode 3, and it's a shame they didn't really do much else with it. Then swoops down a Pidgeotto and Ash wants to capture it as well. This is where we see a few of them good old rookie mistakes come into play. Ash trying to capture it without weakening it for starters, which doesn't work as Pidgeotto is a bit harder to catch than Caterpie. And then he also sends in the bug Caterpie to battle with it, which obviously never ends well, but Pikachu comes in and does end up getting the job done pretty easily, snagging Ash's second new capture, Pidgeotto. I do love how realistic this is. Someone like Ash, he's brand new to this, he has no idea what he's doing. Misty is just giving him stick, but this is how you learn, and I really enjoyed his development in this episode. He learned some valuable lessons to take forward. And just like that, Ash is thrusted into his first Pokemon battle. Well, I don't know if we can exactly call it that. It was mainly just Team Rocket shenanigans and nonsense. But Pidgeotto gets taken down, so Ash has to rely on his only able Pokemon being Caterpie. And it uses String Shot to defeat Ekans and Coffin. A pretty cool ending to this episode as it was mainly focusing on Caterpie and its development, and it does end up evolving into Metapod, which makes sense as they do evolve so quickly. And then the episode ends with Ash charging ahead in search of more Pokemon. I really like this episode, it's one of my favourite early ones. I just love the new trainer vibes and how Ash learns some of these tough lessons, but also he starts to enjoy himself a bit more, he starts to get excited and move forward trying to acquire his team. And we also get a sign of things to come in how Ash and Misty are just constantly bickering. It's all just really great stuff, and a lot happened here. He caught 2 new Pokemon and even had one of his Pokemon evolve for the very first time. This was a really solid one, and I'm going to give it a rating of 8 out of 10. Episode 4, Challenge of the Samurai. This episode sees Ash and Misty still venturing through the dangerous Viridian Forest. Seriously, there seems to be a flock of Beedrill around every corner. Ash is pretty giddy with his new captures from last episode, so he's hunting down some more, including a Weedle that gets away. The lessons in this episode are pretty important and something that Ash takes with him on his journey and becomes quite well known for. But first enters the iconic mysterious Samurai, who Ash gets annoyed with for distracting him from catching Weedle. And turns out Samurai has battled all 3 of the other trainers from Pallet Town, including Gary, so it was nice for a little mention of his progress. They were all pretty strong, so he decides to challenge Ash as well. So technically this is Ash's very first official trainer battle, not counting the silly Team Rocket battle from last time. And as far as battles goes, it wasn't the best. Of course it gets memed on so much with people saying that Metapod versus Metapod is the greatest battle of all time, which is hilarious. Ash does pretty well with Metapod, but this battle is more so to show how incompetent he is, like sending out tired Pokemon and then eventually getting his Metapod swooped away by an incoming Beedrill. But the lesson for Ash in this episode is, rather than focus on blaming other people or running in head first, just think of your Pokemon first. Their health and their safety always comes first, and it was pretty cool for Ash to learn this lesson in this episode. The episode in general was solid. It's an iconic episode for sure, but I gotta say this is the first one where Team Rocket weren't really needed. They didn't add much to the episode, and there is a lot of this in the early days of Pokemon. They had a few funny moments but didn't really advance the plot all that much. But the ending was probably the highlight, with Ash coming back to save Metapod, and it pays Ash back by jumping out of its hands and saving him from the Beedrill and then evolving into Butterfree. Some great stuff to wrap this up and earn Samurai's trust. And they promise to battle again someday. Can't wait to see that. So this episode I'd say was above average, pretty decent. It definitely helped Ash grow a bit more. And of course we got the debut of his famous Butterfree. So I'll give this a rating of 6 out of 10. Episode 5, Showdown in Pewter City. Alright, so we're getting into some juicy stuff here. Ash and Misty have arrived in Pewter City, the first place to have a gym, and straight away we bump into a weird dude trying to sell some rocks. Classic Pokemon. We all know this turns out to be Flint, Brock's dad, who is a minor but semi-important character in the series. It's interesting that this is where Ash first learnt about the Pokemon League Regional Championship, better known as just the Pokemon League. And this is the episode where he decides he's actually going to go around all of the gyms and compete. And it was all thanks to seeing this poster on the wall. So the first real episode that was setting up the whole battling aspect of the series. Ash heads to the gym, and this is where we are first introduced to the man, the myth, the legend, Brock. He had such a cool introduction, so calm, sitting there waiting for the challenge in the dark. And then the lights come on and the rock battlefield comes out. Despite Ash really not being ready for this battle, it was still just a really cool way to set up this whole gym challenge. Brock is revealed to own an Onix, who goes up against Ash's Pikachu. Ash's very first gym battle is finally here, let's go. And it's over pretty quickly. Yeah, Ash really wasn't ready for this. Onix basically just binds out Pikachu until it can no longer continue. But there is nothing wrong with this battle from a writing perspective. I get it's not a good battle in terms of actual battling, but this makes sense for where Ash's character is up to at this point. So I don't take away points for the episode for having this battle being a bit underwhelming. However, the same can't be said for the second battle, but first things first, Ash goes off with Flint to power up Pikachu for the rematch. Yeah, this was a bit of a lazy way to create a rematch, but nevertheless Ash heads back and Brock is revealed to own a Geodude, and this thing literally gets shocked to a crisp. People give this a lot of stick since it's an electric type move and that can't hit a rock type Pokemon, but it's early Pokemon days so I can forgive this one a lot easier. But this battle wasn't very good. It was a repeat of the first one, but this time the sprinklers go off and that gives Ash the water boost to try and take down Onix, which is totally unfair in itself. Ash quits because he doesn't want to upset Brock's siblings, and he feels bad for the sprinklers going off, so he doesn't want to win in an unfair way. The end of the episode has positives and negatives. Brock gives Ash the badge, which means Ash has officially earned his first ever badge, the Boulder Badge. Kind of. And then Brock chooses to join up with Ash after learning that Flint was still here in town and that he can look after the family. So this episode was a bit all over the place, but I still really like it. It's hard to take away points from this one simply because it's so early in Pokemon and they were still figuring stuff out. Ash was still a new trainer, the sprinklers nonsense was unforgivable, but the rest of it I kind of enjoyed. I love Brock's introduction. We see the kind of guy he is straight away, how hard he works to keep his family fed and safe, just some really wholesome stuff, and our main trio is now complete. I think overall this episode did more good for the series than it did bad, so I'm going to give it a solid rating of 7 out of 10. And with that wraps up part 1 of the series. We definitely had quite a lot happen in these first 5 episodes, as expected, But here are some of the breakdowns for what we had. The top ranked episodes, we have episode 1 Pokemon I Choose You leading the way with that 9 out of 10 rating. And for the overall average score for the Indigo League so far, we have a 7.4, which is pretty good, but this will definitely drop as we get more filler episodes and less story focused ones. But let me know what your thoughts are on all of this. Please support the series if you want to see more. If we can get to 100 likes, then I'll start working on the next one right away. But thanks for watching, please like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time.